Welcome. My name is Jessica Gladden. I'm here today to share a little bit of information that I've been learning around yoga and mental health. And we're going to look at perspectives and practices from both the United States and India, particularly in the area of yoga therapy for mental health support. So, whenever I teach any kind of yoga related session, I like to start with just a little bit of an exercise so we can get settled into our own bodies. So if you can, find a nice tall seat, lengthen tall through your spine. And if you're in a place where you can, perhaps place your feet on the floor and maybe take off your shoes so you can really feel that connection between your feet and the floor. In this practice, we're working to create increased awareness. We're not looking for any particular kind of experience other than being more aware of what's happening in our body. And with any yoga practice, the most important thing is that you listen to your body. So if any of these suggestions that I'm giving causes any kind of pain, don't do it. Listen to your body, do what's right for you. So from here, you can either choose to gaze down away from the computer or close your eyes so you can find that better connection with your own body. Take a few moments to settle into your body and begin to notice what you're feeling in this moment. You might notice the sensation of your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair, or the lengthening through your spine. You might notice if you're holding on to some extra tension, perhaps through your neck and shoulders, or if there's any emotions that are present. Note that and let them be there. We'll explore a few very simple movements, focusing on our neck and our shoulders, because those are places that tend to hold on to a lot of extra tension. So sit nice and tall, shoulder blades pulled together, and keep this position. Keep that length of your spine through all of these slow, simple exercises. As you're ready, on an exhale, tuck your chin down towards your chest. And begin to notice if you feel a lengthening through the back of your neck, and perhaps even into your upper spine and shoulders. Whatever's there, simply notice. On your next inhale, begin to look up towards the ceiling. See if you notice some opening through your throat and your chest. Maybe your shoulders are pulled down and back to help open through these areas. We'll add in a little bit more movement. Next exhale, tuck your chin down. Next inhale, look up. One more time, exhale down. Inhale up. And then come back to center. As you're ready, start to look over your right shoulder. Hold here for the first one. See if you notice a lengthening or a stretch through the left side of your neck. Find that awareness. As you're ready, inhale back to center. Exhale, look over your left shoulder. See what you notice through the right side of your neck. Take a few breaths here. Then again, we'll speed this up for 2 more rounds. Come back to center. Look over to the right. Inhale, center. Exhale, left. One more time, move through center to the right. Center to the left. And back to neutral. Take a nice big breath in. Exhale, let it all out. And bring your awareness into your shoulders. Again, just a short, simple exercise to release a little bit of tension from our shoulders. So begin to move your shoulders up, back, and down, and roll them out. You can do this at any pace that feels comfortable in your body. Notice how this feels. You could even explore one shoulder at a time if that would feel nice in your body. And if you would like, at some point, switch that direction, roll your shoulders forward and down. Again, this could be both or one at a time. Find a movement through your shoulders that feels nice to your body. And just one time, we're gonna bring our shoulders way up towards our ears. We're gonna make little fists of these muscles here. Bring some tightness into that muscle. And then on an exhale, drop your shoulders way down. And then notice how your shoulders feel now after that movement. Is there anything a little bit different to your neck or your shoulders? Do you have a little bit more awareness? Take a moment, notice your breath. Perhaps take some slow, full breaths in and even longer exhales. Take 3 rounds of breath that way. Full breath in. Long exhale out. Breathe at your own pace. And notice the flow of your breath. One more. Long exhale out. And then begin to bring your awareness back to the space around you. If your eyes are closed, you might flutter them open. If you're looking down, you might look up and even take a look around the room, the space that you're in. And then bring your focus back to the computer as you're ready. All right, let's dive in. So one of the things I like to start is, why am I doing this research study? Why am I talking about this? So I've been a clinical social worker for over 20 years. I've been practicing yoga for about that long, but I've been a yoga teacher since about 2016. And right away when I started yoga, I was aware of how much it can help impact people's mental health. So I've been doing yoga-based therapy in my clinical practice, as well as with my students at the university, because my students tend to have a lot of anxiety as well. I've also noticed from previous trips to India that yoga is a little bit different in the United States and in India. So the practice just in a typical classroom or a studio is different. So I began to wonder how yoga as a therapeutic tool might be different in the 2 countries. And I had some suspicions that it would be different, but I wasn't sure how it would be different. So I decided to write a proposal and do a Fulbright semester in India doing a little bit of teaching at the university, but really focusing on researching yoga-based therapy in India. Because I already know a little bit in the United States, I'll share that in a moment. But here's what I've been doing. So I wanted to do a qualitative exploratory study. What this means is I haven't found any research that's been done looking at the two different countries and how yoga is done differently, especially in the area of yoga therapy. So an exploratory study means this is kind of the first of its kind. We haven't done this before, so we're really just looking for some beginning ideas. So I've been doing two sets of things. I've been using some semi-structured research interviews with people who are mental health based yoga therapists in India. I will also do this in the United States in upcoming months. So I've been interviewing a range of people, and I've been doing a lot of what's called participatory research. So what that means is I've been doing things as well as talking to people. So you'll see at the very bottom of this, I've been doing yoga classes at studios. I've been attending educational seminars, doing things to learn about how mental health is being supported by yoga. So one of the biggest programs here in Bangalore is called the Art of Living, and they have a happiness program. So I attended the happiness program, which is a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy combined with asana and pranayama work, so breath work and some movement. I did an online training session for yoga for anxiety from some folks in Rishikesh. NIMHANS has been a wonderful resource. That is the National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. And I've been invited very kindly by some of the professionals there to observe the actual yoga therapy sessions that they're doing for different issues such as anxiety and depression, even schizophrenia, as well as I was invited to participate in their month-long program that was called Beginning Yoga for Mental Health Professionals. So they were primarily working with psychologists who have not had a lot of exposure to yoga and giving them some introductory training on how to use yoga as part of their practice. So these participatory experiences have given me a whole nother level of insight into what's being done actually in the real world, not just what people are saying they're doing, but what is actually happening. So in India, I interviewed 12 yoga therapists and I did all of those different experiences. When I come back to the United States, I will also interview another 12 or so yoga therapists. I do have a basic understanding of how we do yoga therapy for mental health in the United States because that's what I've been doing for a while. But I want to hear what other people are doing, knowing that everyone does things a little bit differently. With these interviews, we're going to do some transcription and then I'll analyze it in a program called NVivo where you can pull out the main themes of what people have been discussing. And then we'll look at the main themes from the United States and the main themes from India, how they compare, how they're different, a little bit more of what's going on. So that's the research study that I am currently completing the India section, and then we'll come back to the United States and do that section. So to give people a little bit more perspective, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I know so far as far as what we're doing for yoga therapy in the United States. Typically what we call this is trauma-sensitive yoga. Trauma-informed yoga is different. That could be anything in any studio where the yoga instructor or the yoga teacher has some awareness that people in the classroom may have experienced trauma and do some things to try to make the experience a little bit easier for them. Trauma-sensitive yoga is basically what we are calling yoga therapy in the United States. Typically, this is being done as what we call an adjunctive treatment. So this is not going to be the primary thing that people are doing. They're still doing that traditional talk-based therapy, but they will be doing some other body-based interventions such as yoga at the same time. Other body-based interventions might be Tai Chi. It could be some cultural activities such as drumming, anything that gets the body involved in movement and experiential activities can be used as a body-based intervention if it's done mindfully. So we can do yoga completely mindlessly, just move through the motions, not have any therapeutic value, or we can really focus on some specific things and have a lot of therapeutic value. In the United States, this is typically done by a master's level therapist. So this will be your licensed master social worker. This will be your, usually don't see so much with the psychologist, but maybe a licensed master's counselor. These are the people that are going to be doing this if they have additional training in a specific body-based intervention. So you don't have just anybody saying, oh, I'm going to do yoga therapy just because I like doing yoga. You have to have that specific training for this. I've seen two ways where this can work well. You could have a client with a separate primary talk-based therapist and then come and do individual work with a yoga-based therapist. Or you could have a yoga-based therapist who's also doing the talk-based stuff one-on-one, and then they are coming to a group session. What can be a little bit challenging in my personal experience is if you say we're going to do both the talk-based processing and the yoga therapy, both one-on-one in the same hour, that doesn't really give you enough time. So people tend to get very distracted with all the things that they want to tell you about what's going on with this week and all the processing that needs to happen. And the yoga might come in second and not really take place. So it's nice to have those two things a little bit separate. Absolutely fine if the same person is doing both things. So for me, a lot of my people have seen me one-on-one for the talk-based processing, and then they'll come to my yoga, my trauma-sensitive yoga group one night a week. Typically in the United States, we have a focus on the asanas, which is the movement, the different positions we do, and the pranayama, which is the breathing practices. Sometimes we have a little bit of meditation. Typically what I've seen is more of a guided meditation process. So for example, I had one client who did mostly talk-based work with me, the processing work, the cognitive piece, but they really liked to end the session with a 10 to 15 minute guided meditation. So I would take whatever we were talking about that day as their main issue for the week, and I would turn that into a guided meditation to help that to settle into their body in a different way. Typically, what we don't do is a lot of silent meditation, because if people have a lot of trauma triggers and you ask them to sit in stillness and silence, that can cause a lot of emotions and triggers to come up. So we typically don't do a lot of longer meditations. You could do some short meditations, see how your clients do with that, and then add on. The chanting and spirituality that we'll see in the Indian-based yoga therapy is much more minimal and kind of rarely included in the United States. Spirituality in our yoga practice can be important, not minimizing that, but in a therapeutic setting, one of our guidelines is that we are not pushing any form of spirituality on the other person. If they bring it up and they want to work on their own spirituality, great, we can absolutely do that. But we're not going to introduce something that scares people away because they think it's religious or spiritual in some way. So we have to be very careful and walk a very fine line with that area. Another way to look at some of the things going on in the United States is that we are really focusing on a different way of looking at the movement and looking at the different things that's happening in the body when we're doing yoga. So we're looking at engaging the body in a set of physical forms and movements. Typically, these are pretty standard hatha yoga movements, things that you would see in any yoga studio, but we change the emphasis of what we're doing so that there's a lot more of a focus on empowerment and how we can create a positive relationship to the body. So how does that actually happen? That sounds grand, but what do we do to do that? So part of it is that we are not really looking at our positions, our shapes of being correct. We're not worried about perfect alignment, and we're not having the emphasis be that the teacher is telling the student exactly what to do, that external authority. What we really want instead is for the focus to be on the internal experience of that individual. So we want them to be able to notice what they're feeling in their body. A lot of people who've experienced trauma are very disconnected from their body, and they don't have that awareness of physical sensation. So we want people to notice, if I'm in this position, I really feel some sensation in my thigh, or I really feel a stretch through my arms or my side body. And then we want to give people the opportunity to, once they've noticed, take action based on what they've noticed. So maybe they say, oh, the sensation in my thigh is really intense. I'm going to choose to come out of that position and stop that sensation. Or I'm going to choose to sit with that sensation and know that it's only going to last for a little while. Maybe the choice is, I notice if my arms are stretched overhead, I have a lot of sensation in my shoulders. Maybe I want a little bit more, so I stretch up. Or maybe that causes pain in my shoulder. I'm going to empower myself to take action and come out of that so that I don't feel pain. So we really have a shift in orientation from that external physical form to the internal experience. This is one of our main points in trauma-sensitive yoga. And along with this, we want the power shift to be a little bit different. So when we work with people who've experienced trauma, trauma happens when power has been taken away. A choice has been taken away from a person, and that is what has caused that trauma. They were not able to make a decision as to whether or not this experience happened to them. So we want people to have the power to make those choices. Whether it's I'm going to bring my arms down because this hurts my shoulder, or maybe I'm going to do a completely different position because that feels better in my body. So we want people to restore the connection between the body and the mind, and to increase that sense of agency, that ability to make choices that often takes place when trauma happens. So sometimes it's a little uncomfortable as an instructor. So some of my best classes have been when I have 8 students in the room and I'm giving some instructions, some suggestions to what people might explore in their body. And I look around the room and every single person is doing something a little bit different. That is actually a success. That means that they're making their own choices for what's good for them. As an instructor, that can be a little bit different than what we're used to seeing in a yoga studio, where we want everyone to be doing the same or a very similar kind of thing. So it takes a little bit of a different mindset to go into this form of therapy. So here's another example of what this might look like. This is an article that I wrote with Rachel Morrow and Kelly Clivey, who are working with a program here in Grand Rapids. So in a 6-week series, we had specific themes that we were looking at every week. And this is not the only way to do it. This is just one way that you could do it. So our first week, we're really looking at grounding. People often come a little bit nervous for the first session. They're not sure what's going to happen. So we want to really work on calming the sympathetic nervous system, that part of the nervous system that says something's going on, I got to pay attention. Helping them ground into the parasympathetic nervous system, where we're able to rest and digest and have a more relaxed sensation in the body. So we're working on that sense of self. So these positions might be slower, they might be closer to the ground, we might cue awareness a lot more. A second session might really focus on relationship and reconnection. And these are in two different ways. This is relationship and reconnection with the person's own body, as well as with another individual. So often we hear, there's this great quote from Judith Herman, who's a trauma author, who says that because trauma happens in the context of a relationship, healing has to happen in the context of a relationship as well. So when we have that relationship with another person that's built in safety and connection, you're healing that trauma experience. So in our trauma sensitive yoga class, we as the instructor are doing all of the movements with the people. We are not walking around the room. We're not giving adjustments, physical adjustments or specific verbal adjustments. We're just doing the movements with people. This helps people to see what's happening, which also decreases a lot of that anxiety. But it also says, hey, I'm here with you. I'm doing the same thing as you. Let's have this experience together. So that is a huge part of what we're doing through the entire time, but we might have some more thematic discussion about that in our second class. Our third class might really work on attunement. Attunement is simply another way of saying mindfulness. So in mindfulness, we're paying attention on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. This mindfulness activity helps us, again, reduce that fight or flight that's in that sympathetic nervous system. And over time, this actually causes a part of the brain called the amygdala to shrink. The amygdala gets bigger and takes up space when there's more trauma response, there's more sympathetic nervous system reaction. When that goes down and we're more present in this moment, our amygdala shrinks, which gives our higher order brain functions such as awareness and decision making a little bit more space to become thicker, to grow, and to function better. So we really will focus on mindfulness again through all of our sessions, but our third class might have a particularly strong emphasis on attunement. Compassion is going to be another area that we work on. That might be our theme for our fourth class. What we tend to find is that at most people, this is not even just trauma survivors or people who come in for anxiety or something like this, most people are much better at offering compassion to other people than they are at offering compassion to themselves. So you might, if your sister or your friend failed at something and they're really struggling with that, you would be very kind and very supportive to them. But if you have that same experience, you're very upset with yourself, you say, oh, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that, messages like that. So we might focus on self-love, we might do a loving kindness meditation, we might bring in the concept of ahimsa, which is a yoga concept around non-harming. And that when you say those negative messages to yourself, you're harming yourself, which is going against one of our basic principles of yoga. So we might really emphasize compassion and non-harming. And we can bring that back into that empowerment idea. So some parts of self-compassion might be, if this position does not feel good in my body, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to have kindness for myself and choose not to do this thing that doesn't feel good. And then in our fifth class, we might focus a lot on empowerment. So by now people might feel a little bit more comfortable in the class. So we might give more options of you can do this position or this position. And they're usually related. They're usually maybe one step more difficult or one step easier, but giving people some very clear options and then letting them make those choices. Our sixth class out of that series might be combining all of those different ideas, doing a little bit of a review, reinforcing these themes in our additional classes. Now, a 6-week series is not the only way to go. 6 weeks is pretty short. So you might choose to have a longer series, which would be amazing. But this is a great introduction to some of the main themes that you might focus in. And at the bottom of this slide, you can see there's the reference for that article if you want to read about that in a little bit more depth. So that's some of the themes from the United States. Let's shift a little bit to what I've seen in India so far, knowing that this is a very exploratory preliminary study. So one of the things that I have been very impressed with is that most of the yoga therapists here, they have a specific master's degree or a PhD in yoga, not in therapy, mental health therapy, but in specifically in yoga. So this is interesting because they have a lot more basis in the philosophy and the other parts of yoga besides just the asana and pranayama, the movement and breath work that we usually see in the United States. Another part of this is that mental health and physical health are not seen as separate things in India the way that they are seen in the United States. So they're seen as being together, being one and the same. So there's a lot more unity in the way that people look at life. Things are not separated into these little silos that we do in the United States. Yoga is very holistic. It covers all of the different parts of life. This is not just something you do once a week at a yoga class at your favorite studio or gym. It's holistic. So this will include things like when you wake up, when you go to sleep, what you're eating, how much you're eating, how you behave. Yamas are like ethical guidelines. Niyamas are like personal behaviors such as cleanliness that help you take care of yourself. So we're going to be looking at all of these things in addition to the movement, the breath work, and the meditation that we might see in the United States. One of the big ways that they explain this is in something called panchakoshas, which is layers or sheaths of the body. This starts with the gross physical body and moves inwards to different layers. So we're moving from the physical body to emotions, to inner subtle body details. And this is a whole system of how they're looking at physical and mental health. And in a future point, I'll probably explain that a little bit more in depth, not so much today. There is a much stronger emphasis of long-term care. So most people think of working with their yoga teacher or a guru to change their overall mental health mindset and patterns for a long period of time. So some of the people that I have interviewed have said, oh yeah, I've worked with this person for the last year. So it's almost more like a substitute for mental health therapy, because here in India, here's an interesting piece that might be important as well. Here in India, they don't have a whole lot of mental health support. There's no layer of master's level social workers and counselors that are doing talk-based therapy. They have psychologists who can do a little bit of that, but there's not very many of them here. They have psychiatrists who will do the prescriptions for medication, but there's not a system or a understanding that you can go and talk to a master's level counselor to work on your issues. So in a lot of ways, the yoga therapists really take on this role, even though a lot of their training is more based on the physical health, they're doing this mental health role as well. So that is part of that long-term journey, just like you might work with a master's level counselor for a year to work on your challenge. In the United States, you might be working with a yoga therapist for a year to work on a similar challenge. Yoga philosophy and spirituality is much more included here. So part of that is just the culture that people grow up with. So if we say something is from the Bhagavad Gita, here in India, they have a basic understanding of what that text is and what the main lessons are, even if it's not something that they're really having in-depth knowledge of. Or if you say the Yoga Sutras, they're going to say, okay, yeah, I know what that is. I know that that has good life lessons. In the United States, we have to be a little careful of that because some people will think that that is a religious text only for people who are from the Hindu tradition, and that if you're Christian or Muslim or something else, you cannot read these scriptures and participate in that level of what we would call philosophy. Here in India, that philosophy that spirituality is already included is just something that's kind of understood as they're growing up. So it's not something that has to be separate, and they can use the wisdom from those different texts. One thing that I have noticed here in India is that, similar to the United States, but even worse, the largest barrier seems to be time. So I would say in the United States, time is also a huge barrier. There's a lot going on, especially people who have kids and work and other things. But in India, there's a lot more pressure from work and a higher expectation for the number of hours that you're working. There doesn't seem to be this cutoff. It's like you just keep going. I hear of a lot of people that do 12, 14-hour days. They live an hour and a half away from home, so they drive home, they do it again the next day. So a lot of the people I've talked to who are not yoga teachers said that they know that yoga would be good for them. They absolutely understand that. They say they just don't have time because of their work schedules. Some of the people that I've talked to that do practice yoga, not as a teacher, just as practicing, they're getting up at 4 a.m. to do their yoga practice. And that's amazing. I'm super impressed with that. I know I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to do anything. Don't know about you, but I don't know a whole lot of people that would be willing to do that in the United States. As I said, if you are, awesome, please do that. But time is a huge barrier. Just getting from one place to another in Bangalore can take an excessive amount of time, and then expectations from work is just much higher. So kind of pulling this together, in the United States, we have a lot more focus on the movement part, but the movement part is focused on awareness of the body and empowerment in a very, very different way than in India. India is like, here's this position, do this position, this position, this position. We're going to correct you if you do it wrong. And the United States is much more relaxed and exploratory for the person. We do some breath work in the United States, which is amazing. Breath work is one of the fastest ways to change how your body is feeling and to move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. We don't have as much of an emphasis on pranayama, breath work, or on meditation in the United States. So that's an area that we can definitely grow on. In India, there's a much more holistic form of yoga being used as an intervention. At that National Institute for Mental Health that I was talking about, people are coming in every day, 5 or 6 days a week is suggested for some of these practices, especially for the first month or two. So they are being involved in these practices almost every day and for perhaps a much longer period of time. And in their one-on-one discussions, they're looking a lot more at the overall lifestyle. So they're including the mental, the physical, the spiritual. All of these things are connected in a much different way. So it's almost like there's a higher expectation for commitment to whatever yoga practice you're doing in India compared to what we do in the United States. I have been reading through a lot of the literature to see kind of how this compares. And so far what I've seen is they're actually pretty close. So a lot of the literature from India talks about the whole lifestyle and talks about yoga as not just this one little pillar, one little slice, but the whole way of living. All those different areas that we've talked about. The United States literature around interventions such as medication and psychotherapy, in general, again, we're not telling people how to live. We might talk about sleep hygiene, but we're not saying you should go to sleep at this time of day. So our yoga therapy, similarly, has less of an emphasis on how that person should live or how to change that lifestyle. Even though we might talk about some different areas, we're not saying this is what the Yoga Sutra says about how you should be living. We're going to say, okay, let's talk about how you could have better sleep or how you could have whatever. You get the idea. In the United States, our literature around most interventions with yoga focus on that movement, the asana, a little bit of pranayama and meditation. Again, really more as a form of connection with the body for empowerment And usually as an adjunctive treatment, you're either going to have another therapist or your therapist is also going to be doing that talk-based processing. One of the things that is really kind of cool in India is that they've been working on integrating yoga into their mental health systems, into healthcare, more and physical healthcare, because mental health care is not as separate, right? They've been doing this since the 40s. So there's some organizations like NIMHANS in Bangalore that has a whole integrated medicine system within the overall hospital. So there's inpatient and outpatient systems for physical and mental health care issues. So you might have someone come in to the hospital for back pain, and they might end up being referred to the yoga session. They might come in for schizophrenia and be referred to the yoga session. They also do Ayurveda and other treatments as well. So the literature is reflecting this move towards more of a holistic system of healthcare in general. The United States is pretty far away from this. Some people even have trouble just getting reimbursement to do yoga as a body-based intervention, even as a mental health professional. And if you don't have that mental health professional license, you won't be reimbursed for yoga therapy from insurance companies, which is what pretty much everyone needs to use. So we are pretty far away from having yoga therapy or yoga-based therapy or any body-based intervention included in our general healthcare system. I am noticing some spelling errors here. That's okay. Have a couple references there for you at the bottom if you're curious. And this is what I would usually ask for questions. Obviously, online, you're not going to be able to give me feedback here, but you know how to reach out to me. Send me an email if you have any questions. And here are a couple of the references we use. There's a ton of other information. There is a great book by David Emerson on trauma-sensitive yoga, if you want to read a whole book just on trauma-sensitive yoga. The one book that I recommend to everyone as kind of a starting point is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. So that's a great starting point if you just want to learn about how the body is involved with mental health and how you can work to learn a little bit more about it. One of the cool things in this book is the last third of the book is a chapter each on all of these different body-based interventions. So you can learn about EMDR, yoga, theater is in there. There's lots of different things that can be used as a body-based intervention that you can find there. And with that, we will go ahead and end our session. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this whole time, and I hope you learned a little bit. Thank you very much.